The history of the spoon is an unexpected wild ride through time. It's a simple tool that has changed drastically since its inception thousands of years ago. And over the course of human civilization, some very interesting patterns emerge in the choices we've made about how to best eat our soup. Let's start at the beginning. The earliest scooping tools, long before stainless steel or even fire-forged bronze, were as primitive as the people who used them. No one knows exactly what they would have called them, but archaeologists are fairly certain that early humans didn't even use spoons, so much as scoop with whatever they had. This may have included bits of bark, hardened animal bladders, or hollowed bones. It wasn't elegant, but it got the soup into their mouths. A knife, for instance, could technically scoop up soup, although it might not be very good at it. As more people populated the world, the need for individual tools became more important. Many theories exist about why humans moved from a hunter-gatherer society to one that farmed and raised livestock. There are many contributing factors, including climate change, the need for more dependable food sources, and an increase in population. This was after humans invented the technique of smelting, which allowed them to extract metals like bronze from ore. Bronze is an alloy, meaning it's made from combining two or more metals, in this case, copper and tin. At first, they were likely just rocks placed under bowls to keep them steady. Over time, the spoon became a ubiquitous part of meals. Throughout Europe, Asia, and Africa, civilizations rose and fell. Empires expanded and contracted. New diseases ravaged populations. Yet throughout it all, the humble spoon endured. While its shape and size remained mostly the same, slight variations developed in different regions. We use these tools to eat it, whether we're at home or on the go. Manufacturers now offer sets with dozens of possible combinations. Sometimes they're made of plastic for convenience or crystal for elegance. We even have space-themed sets. Regardless of what they're made of, the average American owns about 38 spoons, enough to share with friends and family, and maybe even a few extra to pass along to the next generation. Eventually, though, humans learned to fashion them out of wood, ceramic, and eventually metal. Chinese spoons typically had a deeper bowl with a high back to prevent spillage. Islamic cultures favored elaborately decorated ceramic spoons, sometimes with inscriptions from the Quran. Meanwhile, in pre-Columbian America, spoons were typically made out of wood. The Inca were particularly adept at crafting these implements, which often had a distinctive triangular shape. It gave poorer people a chance to enjoy their soup without worrying about knocking it over and wasting it. It was until the Industrial Revolution in the late 18th century that mass manufacturing techniques allowed for these luxury metals to become commonplace. For the first time, people could own multiple sets of spoons and even have different ones for different purposes. Teaspoons were smaller and more delicate. Soup spoons had deeper bowls, and soup ladles had long handles to reach into tall-sided bowls. For everyone else, it simply freed up space in their homes. In 19th century England, manufacturers standardized the size of the teaspoon. Today, it measures about 150 milliliters, or 5 teaspoons. Meanwhile, American manufacturers favored slightly larger versions. The tablespoon, too, was standardized in the 19th century, first in England and then the United States. It holds about 15 milliliters, or 3 teaspoons. The soup ladle, with its long handle and deep bowl, remains largely unchanged from its 18th century counterpart. It's useful for serving soup from a tureen or a stock pot. The serving spoon, on the other hand, has evolved to serve both soup and other dishes. No longer did they need to bring their bowls and spoons with them wherever they went. They could leave their eating utensils at home and take a rest with them instead. Adding tin to copper improves its hardness and durability, making it easier to craft tools and weapons. For the first time, humans were creating durable, reusable objects instead of relying on naturally occurring resources like stone and bone. Bronze was also easier to cast, a process by which liquid metal is poured into a mold and allowed to harden into a specific shape. This meant that they could create more intricate designs. Once agriculture was established, though, humans no longer needed to move from place to place in search of sustenance. Unlike the rounded ends of early spoons, which were more shovel than scoop, these were shaped more like modern teaspoons. They were perfectly round on one end to make getting every last drop of soup possible. The other end, inserted into the mouth, had a small notch cut into it so that the spoon wouldn't slip forward and make the user choke. This was an elegant solution, but it would have been quite expensive. Early bronze was not only difficult to work with, but also rare. Only the wealthy could afford to lose an entire pot of soup if they accidentally knocked it over while eating. This might have contributed to the development of another invention, the rest. This allowed for the specialization of labor and the development of new technologies, like, you guessed it, the humble spoon. The difference between a knife and a spoon is largely the shape of the bowl, where the handle meets the working end. It makes sense, then, that as humans became more sedentary, their tools did, too. Instead of carrying a scooping implement on their person, they could leave it with their bowl, making it easier to get another helping of soup. This is about when the idea of the communal bowl gave way to individual ones, and having a designated utensil to eat from each person would have been an obvious next step. These would have been very simple tools made from wood or bone. They might have even resembled the ladles commonly used in China today. Without this distinct feature, the earliest spoons would have looked more like sharp-edged bowls, something that seems to have been common about 10,000 years ago. With it, they developed more complex thought processes and an increased ability to problem solve. In fact, scientists believe that without this increase in brain power, humans wouldn't have been able to migrate and spread to different parts of the world. For our purposes, though, it meant that they were better able to conceive of and craft a more sophisticated tool. They were often crafted from deer leg bones with a rounded tip. After all, they were still mostly eating meat. It wasn't until grains were cultivated that thick, hearty soups became possible. This didn't happen until about 6,500 years ago. Until then, most soups were thin broths used to supplement protein-rich meals of game and fish. These advancements provided them with the ability to harvest while we don't know for sure what those thoughts looked like. We do know that Homo sapiens began to fashion complete tools out of bone, stone, and antler. They learned to sharpen edges and scrape surfaces. What these tell us is that early humans had begun to find and use resources in their environments that were well suited for scooping, and prepare new foods, and also gave them a significant advantage when it came to eating soup. We know this because archaeologists have found remnants. Small pieces of smooth shell shaped like half spheres. Some date back more than 20,000 years. They found a need and used these natural resources to fill it. So the first spoons weren't so much designed as found and used, and then probably forgotten. About 14,000 years ago, people started making more refined tools out of bone. These early humans were skilled hunters who lived in close-knit groups. Their survival depended on their ability to make spears and other weapons to hunt large animals, as well as to cook and eat them. This was also true of the next stage of humans known as Homo sapiens. About 12,000 years ago, Homo sapiens began to spread from Africa and replace earlier forms of humans, such as Homo erectus. This species also relied on hunting and gathering, which necessitated good tools for acquiring and consuming food. One advantage Homo sapiens had over previous human species was a larger brain. While it might be easy to think of a spoon as just a tool to eat soup, it's important to remember that many different tools can do that job. About 10,000 years ago, humans had not only increased in brain power, but in population too. It wasn't until humans settled down into villages and eventually cities that the idea of utensils became widespread. In general, archaeological evidence shows that these early spoons were either deeply scooped or very shallow. The first real revolution in spoon design came about 5,000 years ago in China. Early Chinese bronze spoons often had long handles to keep the user's hand away from hot liquids and decorative motifs. The earliest evidence we have of the rest comes from 4,000 years ago in Mesopotamia. As trade routes expanded and civilizations grew, new materials and ideas were exchanged. In Japan, for instance, spoons were often crafted as one piece from iron or copper. Throughout all of this, precious metals like silver and gold were reserved for the wealthy. Even then, it would be another century before the humble teaspoon finally took its current form. Today, Americans eat about 3 billion bowls of soup every year. Did you know that ancient Egyptians used spoons? Well, they didn't have the silver or gold. They did have plenty of ivory and precious wood. So that's what they carved these magnificent spoons out of. And each one was carefully etched with sacred symbols and designs. But despite how beautiful and intricate they are, the purpose of these spoons is really quite bland. These items were discovered in a tomb. Back in 1826, a French explorer discovered this tomb. It belonged to an ancient Egyptian nobleman named Tutu. Now, you might think that's kind of strange, but ancient Egyptians believed that after you died, you would still need your everyday items. You know, when you enter the afterlife, you don't want to go empty-handed. And what better way to welcome a soul to the afterlife than with a nice bowl of soup? Some of the tombs where these spoons were found also had remnants of actual soup inside of them. Archaeologists were able to identify the remains as gazelle, duck, and possibly some fish. So perhaps these spoons were used to serve up a delicious meal to the deceased. After all, it is common courtesy to bring a spoon when you're invited over for dinner. He lived about 3,300 years ago, so he lived during the 4th dynasty. That was true for everything from their grand pyramids to these simple spoons. Until next time, remember to stay classy, Egypt. In modern times, we use spoons every single day. We take them for granted, but really, these humble tools are a blessing. So the next time you sit down to enjoy a nice bowl of soup, be sure to appreciate the ancient Egyptians who invented the spoon. His tomb was located near the Great Pyramid of Giza. So whoever he was, he must have been pretty important. He was buried with many treasures, including these 13 ivory spoons. To this day, they remain some of the finest examples of ancient Egyptian craftsmanship. They were used to carry porridge or medicinal herbs, and I assume that the longer handle would have been useful for stirring. They would have been heated over a fire, probably by placing them on top of a pot. And because they were made of wood or ivory, they would have been able to withstand the heat without breaking or melting like metal spoons. Some of these wooden spoons even have a long handle attached to them. It seems that spoons like this one might have also been used for religious rituals. I think this one is my favorite, because you can see the intricate details of the design on it. Look at how they carved the hieroglyphics and the little pictures into it. Here you can see a crook and a flail. Those were tools used for harvesting crops. This one shows a man holding to lotus flowers. The lotus flower was sacred to the Egyptians. It represented rebirth, creation, and the sun. One side of the spoon has a bull head, which represented strength and power, and the other side has a baboon holding a flower. The Egyptians associated baboons with the moon. Because some of these spoons were made out of ivory, we can tell they were quite wealthy and most likely belonged to an elite member of society. One interesting thing about these spoons is that sometimes they were buried with the dead. Egyptians took great pride in their work and put a lot of effort into creating beautiful items. The Greeks gave spoons a name, but the Romans gave them rules. In ancient Greece, they called this type of spoon a cochlearium, from the same root as the word for snail. You could even use them for fruit. In fact, there's even some evidence that ancient Greeks used these kinds of spoons as dessert spoons. They were basically the Swiss Army knives of the ancient world. Because this kind of spoon was really good at scooping up snails. You know, when you're out on your Roman holiday and you see those delicious little helix bamosha on the menu. But it was also good for other delicate, narrow, long things, like perhaps a soft boiled egg. And you know, it wasn't just thrown away. There's actually a whole array of these little spoons in there, broken and discarded. What was going on here? We're gonna now make sure that everyone knows exactly what these spoons are for, and how they should be used. And just behind that was the famous Regia, the residence of the Roman emperors from Augustus onwards. So these spoons were probably used in the emperor's dining room. If you don't know what garum is, it's basically a fermented fish sauce. A bit like soy sauce. I mean, just ask the Emperor Nero. whose mother was famously poisoned at a dinner party. Who doesn't love a little hierarchy with their dinner? It was a popular condiment throughout the Roman Empire. I bet you'll love it. And they had a strict three-step process to make sure that the emperor got his meal without any mistakes. First, they would take the food from the kitchen and put it onto the emperor's platter. Then they would put the platter down, turn around 3 times, and then pick it back up again and serve it to him. You can tell it is not a cochlearis because it has a long handle and a bowl at the end. That's the simplest way to distinguish between the two. But trust me, there are more differences than meets the eye. This was a kind of ladle used for serving soup or porridge. The pyxis, a small spoon used for condiments. The pectin, a scallop shell spoon. The haystatium, a kind of dessert spoon. Join me next time, and I'll show you some of those. Until then, happy spooning. In Greece, you could use these spoons for pretty much anything. No, I haven't forgotten about the Romans. It had a fairly deep bowl so that you could get plenty of liquid in each scoop. This was a tool made for hierarchy. But here's where it gets interesting. But then the Romans came along and they said, no, we're gonna give these spoons some rules. So there are several kinds of spoons that we find in Roman archaeological sites, including this one. This one is called a cochlearis. A cochlearis is a soup spoon. It has a fairly large shallow bowl, perfect for serving up some of that delicious chicken broth or maybe some garum. Often we find these objects in contexts which help us understand how they were used. And in this case, we have a wonderful example of that. And you would use these in conjunction with a spuma. Now, this is one of my favorite things about studying Roman archaeology. This little fella was found in a garbage dump in the Roman Forum, right next to the Colosseum. Well, right beside the Colosseum was the Domus Transitoria, the changing rooms for the gladiators. And if you've ever eaten in an emperor's dining room, you'll know it's a stressful experience. These little guys were used by servants, by slaves, to serve up the food. It's almost impossible to imagine now, but in the ancient world, mistakes at the dinner table could get you killed. All of that for a little spoon. And we've barely even talked about the others yet. There was the libanica, a kind of slotted spoon used for serving fish. The acinitum, a kind of strainer spoon. And let's not forget the spoon rests, the trivets, the handles, the cases. All the other stuff that went along with these incredibly important implements of the Roman dinner table. In medieval Europe, the spoon changed everything. Narration. In medieval Europe, the spoon became a symbol of wealth. Nobles carried silver spoons, often personalized and engraved. The common folk used wood, smooth from years of porridge and not much else. As the camera slowly moves away, we see it's mounted on a velvet cushion along with other silverware. Scene suggestion, a long shot of a hand holding a silver spoon. Then a close-up of an engraved design on the handle. I mean, who wouldn't want a giant silver spoon? They were so popular that for a while there was even a spoon tax. Yep, you heard that right. People had to pay a special tax just for owning a spoon. From the 9th to the 15th century, Europe was obsessed with spoons. For the wealthy, this meant showing off their status with oversized, ornately decorated spoons. The fancier, the better, Silver spoons were so expensive that kings and nobles would polish them to a shine and use them as makeshift mirrors. The Black Death, also known as the Plague, was a terrible tragedy that swept through Europe in the 14th century, killing millions. The spoon shortage also gave some prisoners a chance to learn a new trade. Some prisoners were given training in metalworking and silversmithing, allowing them to earn money and possibly even freedom once their sentence was over. So while the Black Death was a terrible tragedy, it did have some positive consequences. So next time you feel like your life is a total bummer, just remember it could have been much worse. You could have been around during the Black Death, and guess what? It hit the spoon industry hard. See, people were dying left and right, so scientists were eager to find out why. This meant that those who were still alive had more bargaining power. They demanded better pay and safer working conditions, and they actually got it. The Black Death may have been a terrible tragedy, but it did have some positive consequences, like better working conditions and a chance for prisoners to learn a new trade. They studied everything from diet to the stars, trying to figure out the cause of the outbreak. While they never found a definitive answer, their research led to some major breakthroughs in science and medicine. Who knows? Maybe you can thank the Black Death for that A+ you got in science class. The death toll was so high that there weren't enough workers to produce all the fancy silverware that the rich folks wanted. So what did they do? They turned to the only available labor source, prisoners. Yes, that's right. During the Black Death, prisoners had a choice: work in the spoon industry or face a much worse fate. Talk about a silver lining. Talk about a royal pain in the, well, you know, we're talking gold. Silver, intricate designs, and sometimes even precious gems. A blacksmith heats metal in a forge. Close-up of hands gripping a wooden spoon handle. An old woman stirs something in a clay bowl. A nobleman holds a silver goblet. And why not? If you've got the money, why not make a statement? But for the poor, life was a little more, shall we say, rustic. Wooden spoons were simple and practical, perfect for the everyday peasant. But let's be real, they weren't exactly winning any awards for their looks. Narration: it all started when eating utensils went from luxury items to, well, necessities. But some folks took things a little too far, as the demand for spoons grew. So did the price. But wait, there's more. Sometimes these humble spoons held secrets. Scene suggestion: a series of quick cuts showing various details. A king's ransom. Narration: back in the Middle Ages, people didn't have toothbrushes, so they used their spoons for more than just eating. But not everyone was so lucky. But it wasn't all bad news. For example, the plague led to a boom in scientific research. Oh, and one more thing. The Black Death also helped to improve working conditions. This is a story about a spoon. Narrator: once upon a time, there were no spoons. People ate with their hands. It was the way of life. But then came the kings. And with the kings came the bards. And the bards sang songs of adventure and faraway lands. A peasant woman is stirring her stew with a gnarled wooden stick. For a spoon of silver, a spoon of gold, a spoon of myth and legend old. A spoon that stirs the pot for the just one small wish is all it'll cost. You seek a spoon of silver bright to bring you fortune in your fight. You seek a spoon of purest gold to make your heart both brave and bold. For centuries, each king and queen desired a new and wondrous spoon, and the bards traveled the land collecting their tales. We see a king dipping his spoon into a bowl of fruit, a queen stirring a potion in an iron cauldron, a knight polishing his spoon on his armor, a princess using her spoon as a comb. You seek a spoon of magic might to banish darkness into light. We see rows upon rows of identical spoons being stamped out by a machine. They are tumbled around in a giant washing machine. A worker hand shapes a batch of spoons at a metal forge. A close-up of a drawer full of ordinary silverware. She looks weary. A traveling bard with a lute on his back approaches her and offers to trade her a song for some of her stew. For who would listen to tales of magic and myth when there were spoons in every house? She accepts, and he sits down on an upturned crate and begins to sing in a lilting voice. We hear the faint ticking of a clock or the hum of the factory machines. And yet sometimes, just sometimes, when we least expect it, magic can be found in the most ordinary of places. And in those songs, they spoke of magic spoons that stirred the pot for you. All you had to do was find one. The clock strikes once. If you look closely, if you take your time, you'll find the magic in the mundane, the extraordinary in the ordinary. For the world is full of wonder and delight, if only we open our eyes to see it. He takes a bite of bread from his bag and settles down to wait for the next customer. Scene: a medieval market. The final clock chimes twice and then falls silent. You travel far and wide, O seeker of spoons, across mountains high and oceans wide. Scene: the woman's face lights up as she listens to the bard's song. For I have seen the silver spoon, the shining beacon of the moon, hidden in a cave, guarded by a troll. They say only the pure of heart can claim the prize, so be warned, adventurer, before you rise. Scene: the woman runs off into the forest. Narrator: and so it went. Scene: a montage of royal feasts and the age of stainless steel. Suddenly, spoons were everywhere, on every table, in every drawer. No longer sacred, no longer special, just a tool. But then came the factories. Scene: black and white factory footage. And so the bards fell silent. Scene: the camera pans away from the drawer, leaving us in darkness. It is an age-old tale, as old as time. A tale of how the very ordinary became extraordinary. Scene: the camera slowly focuses on the eye of a clock, then slowly zooms out to reveal it is in the drawer with all the spoons. Do you hear the call? There's magic in this place after all. Are you listening? Scene: the clock strikes twice. The camera begins to spin slowly, revealing more clocks in the drawer, each one ticking or chimming softly.